So it's time I made the video that I think is in a lot of like dev channels, and now that I've got a few videos in, it's a topic which I think I'd like to weigh in on, which is the topic of whether you actually enjoy a career as a game dev. So first of all, video games are an art. I think there's no denying that. It's taken a few years to get that level of recognition. Now that there's awards, you can get a BAFTA for a video game now, which I think is brilliant. And there's more recognition. A couple decades ago, people just didn't really see it as an art form. People just thought that they were a product that people consumed, and that was that. It wasn't an art form. It was just something kids did in their free time, as opposed to going out, and it just led to them, being obese and whatnot. So that was the kind of the stigma and the view of video games before, but now it's seen as an art form. And if you see yourself as an artist, first of all, I think that's great. And second of all, I think that's great to see yourself as an artist in the context of video games. I think that's brilliant. That being said, it is very different to a lot of other art forms, where I'd say that compared to a few other art forms, there's a lot more, like in terms of percentages, let's put it that way, of how much art and technical side there is. No, yeah, how much art there is versus technical slash science side. For example, I'll give an example. Architecture, people live inside these buildings, so they'd better stand up. So there is a lot of science and technical side. It's not just about making whatever building kind of dawns on you. Whereas something like writing and painting, whilst there's definitely a technical side to it, and there is a lot to be gained in knowing certain things like, sorry, another flight, let's give that a pause. Um, there's definitely something to be gained in knowing technical things like golden ratios, color palettes in terms of art, and then writing in terms of things like the three-act structure, which I mentioned before, or just generally having good grammar and having nice pacing to your prose. So there's still technical side, but for the most part, when you do these types of art, they generally feel mostly art and a little bit technical. I'll give the perspective of when I was writing music for commercials. Even something like that was a very commercial thing to do and had a technical side to it. It still felt more art than science because, like, yes, the mixing and the mastering at the end and knowing certain arrangements and the timings needed for the commercial, that was all very technical. But for the most part, putting in the instruments, putting in the melody and the harmony, it's still more art than science, I feel. In terms of video games, I wouldn't say, I'd say it's around 50-50 depending on the type of game you make. So obviously if you make something very story heavy that might not have quite so much, I'm going to call it active gameplay, then that might have a bit more art. So something like a visual novel or a point and click adventure game or a walking simulator, I actually think that's probably still a little bit more art. So I'd put that about maybe 60-40, 70-30. Whereas something far more technical, like a fighting game or even an RPG or turn-based strategy where there's a lot of maths, there's a lot of things that you need to like level. I'd actually say that the ratio of science is actually a little bit higher, um, around 50-50, but depending on the type of game, it might even edge into 60-40, 70-30, especially if you're trying to make it as realistic as possible. Like realistic as in feeling realistic, so having the physics working and then you've got like special effects. Um, yeah, there's a lot of math behind that. There's a lot of science. So, like it might not seem obvious, but a lot of the math that you might be learning at school is actually going to come in here. Even like staging scenes and like angling the buildings, that feels a bit like architecture. And so, you need to know your angles and then, the positions of the sun for the lighting and the skyboxes. So just bear that in mind if you think this is a career that you're going to go into, that there is still a lot of science and math. So if you don't think you're that strong at STEM, either you're making games that are far more story heavy, but again, you'll still need a bit of that science and math, or you might not be making the type of games that you really want, or you try to get better at those science and maths aspects. So just bear that into mind. And so that's one thing. The other thing is about, since the topic being do you want to be a game dev? Or certainly part one of it, because I realized it's a massive topic, is that, yeah, obviously you don't have the same job security as in other industries. But unlike people who kind of purely learned something that's a bit more of a pure art, so let's say people who learn fine arts like painting or music, I think people who study these things, they sort of have an expectation. They know that it's going to be rough coming out. They know that, like, after they graduate, they might have to work in service industry for a while whilst they're getting their art going and trying to get traction with that. With video games, you're learning a skill like coding. Let's just call it what it is. Computer science and coding. You're going to be learning these skills, and these skills are very useful in the world of software and FANG, like these big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, and stuff like that. And potentially using these great coding skills, you could get paid a lot of money. As we've seen in the last few weeks, it's not the same case in the video game industry. It's some entire studios have come apart, firings have been through the roof, and even for us indies, honestly, the market's been rough the last few months. If I'm being very honest, it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of pushing YouTube a bit, just to open up another like front of revenue. So yeah, like if you're learning these hard skills and you could do that as a career, it is a thought and a half. So just, you have to really love what you're doing and remember that you are taking that pay cut. And it might also edge into your personal life a little bit, in the sense that, like, if your partner knows that you can make more doing something else with the same skills and the bills need to be paid, then obviously, you can't blame them. They're going to bring it up. So these are things that are really important to think about. I think two kind of big-ish topics, though I do think this is a topic I'm going to return to. But I think certainly consider those two things. And don't mind that noise, that's my cat. Anyway, thanks to all the new subscribers. Like, it feels like things are starting to pick up a little bit. So I'm going to try to start making more videos from my new apartment. So take care and hope to see you guys soon. If you want me to delve on this topic sooner, please say so in the comments. Cheers.